Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Transformation Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. On today's show, folks, we have our memorable mentors with Fred Smith, and who is the founder of Federal Express. Hey, how's it going, Ron?
Good, Ed. How are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, we haven't done one of these in a while, and this gentleman is certainly worthy. I've been a big fan for a long time, as you know. Yeah, I can't wait. Let's dive in.
Well, let's talk about this. And of course, the prompt for the show is the fact that back on the 21st of June, Fred passed away at the ripe old age of 80. So good on him. He would have been 81 in August. Fell a little bit short of that. But let me read him in, so to speak. I just put together a quick bio, but he was the founder of FedEx, obviously, which revolutionized the logistics by turning his term paper that he did when he was at Yale into a $90 billion empire. He went to Yale, as I mentioned. He went to the Marine Corps. And then he had this vision for this overnight delivery network that would be different from how other shipping, such as UPS and the post office, had done things. And he launched Federal Express in 1973 with a fleet of only 14 planes. He, at one point, and this is a famous story, I'm sure we'll get into the details of this, gambled the company's survival money on blackjack in Vegas and was able to make payroll. And but his real main innovation, his entrepreneurial audacity, was this hub and spoke model that he put together for packages. So, but it's really, I mean, it was built into a huge empire. I think when he finally passed away, he was one of the richest men in the United States, and just an overall interesting guy. So that's kind of the highlights. But Ron, what did you want to jump in and talk about first?
Well, I know he was born in Marks, Mississippi in like you said, August 11th, 1944, and he suffered from this childhood syndrome called Legg-Calvé-Perthes.
Okay.
And it was like a hip disorder, and he had to walk with crutches. I think he became a pilot in his teens, if that's correct. I didn't check that, but that's what it said. And then he also... his father passed away when he was 4, so he was raised by his mother, Sally. His father was a quite successful businessman. He owned restaurants, a bus line, I think a plantation, and he graduated from Yale in 1966. And like you said, Ed, he wrote that famous paper in 1965 on the hub and spoke system, which he devised. I mean, he changed transportation as we know it, too. That was his innovation. The hub and spoke method that, we're still flying under. Commercially.
Yeah.
Remember, he started FedEx when airlines were still regulated. And so he lived through deregulation as well. And then after he graduated Yale in 1966, he joined the Marines. He did serve 4 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. I think he flew as well. He advanced to captain, and he earned 2 Purple Hearts, a Silver and Bronze Star, and he did 2 tours in Vietnam. And he brought that Marines type leadership to the FedEx culture, and he really had that people, service, profit. Some authors have called it a mission statement. Others have called it a philosophy. I don't know what to call it, but it made a lot of sense. Put people first, give great service to your customers, profit will follow.
Yep. Yeah, no, and that's something that I think it went back to a thing that Xerox had study that Xerox had done in the 60s, right? That said that if you take care of your employees will take care of your customers will then help you with financial performance. Of course, we did talk about that in detail way back when we talked about the halo effect and Phil Rosenzweig's book, because the number one predictor of whether your employees are happy and satisfied is, of course, whether or not you're making a profit. So it seems to be a bit of a circular error, but it sounds nice anyway, right?
It does, but it's easier to be a great employee and give great service when your company is awash in cash.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Exactly. So your employees are happier when you're paying them good salaries because you're making a lot of money. No.
And, you know, like you said, he launched FedEx in 71 with a $4 million inheritance. Now, he did have 91 million in venture backing.
Yes.
Did you dig into any of the details on that? I didn't see who did that, who gave him that money.
I did not, but that is an interesting question. I do know that that would have been 724 million in today's dollars. So he raised almost $1 billion in capital if you think about it today from today's system. So
yeah. And when he launched on April 17th, 1973, he had a fleet of 14 Dassault Falcon jets, and they were serving 25 cities. He named the company Federal Express because he wanted it to sound official so that the Federal Reserve would become an early customer. Now, it didn't, but I do think that it later did become a customer because he was used for check clearing, basically. He would transport the checks, you know, from one bank to the other so they could clear. And, you know, this is the old days, obviously. But I do think he served. I do think he served the Federal Reserve. And of course, right after he started in 73, the OPEC embargo hit, and he was also involved in a lawsuit with a couple of his half sisters because he tapped into the trust without their permission, and I think he forged their signature or something.
It's alleged. In the end, all of the charges were dropped. So I don't know whether he ended up paying them off or what the deal was. But yeah, no, that did come up, that it was $2 million bank loan that he and his family's trust. But you know, when just nothing fixes things like success, I suppose. So
yeah, they probably did settle out of court and all of that.
Right.
So but the details are probably not public. But and apparently he was involved in a hit and run suit too, which was later dropped.
He was involved in 2 fatal car accidents in his lifetime, which really when he was younger. He was the driver of a car, and he was driving out to a lake resort with his friends and flipped the vehicle over, and the passenger in the front seat, who was his friend, passed away. But they never determined the cause of that crash. And of course, what was interesting about the second one, in which he fatally hit and killed a 54-year-old handyman, it was the same evening that the forgery indictment came down. So now.
Wow.
Yeah, he was later arrested and charged with leaving the scene. So you wonder if there was alcohol involved in the situation. But again, he was released on a $250 bond. And of course, this is, back in 1975. Driving while intoxicated was not quite the thing that it is today. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is not an excuse for it. I'm just not trying to excuse him at all. Just saying that back in 1975, it was like, oh, yeah, Fred was drinking and hit somebody.
Yeah, we're kind of approaching Kennedy territory here with some of this stuff. And because of the OPEC thing, he actually asked his pilots to use their personal credit card to buy fuel. And of course, this is what led to the famous trip to Vegas, where he took $5,000 and he ran it into 27,000 on a blackjack table. That was to pay the fuel bill. And that kept him alive for another couple weeks. Company was first profitable in 1976, and it's been profitable every year since.
Yeah. It's funny because I originally remember hearing that story of Fred Smith, and it was a different tale, and I'm sure that the one that's been reported he was down to like one last $5,000 chip or something, and threw it on, just randomly tossed it on the roulette wheel. It came up. But
I have read in various in 2-3 different books on him that it was blackjack,
and that he parlayed it. Yeah.
But I've also read that he used the money to pay the salaries of his employees, not for fuel.
Okay.
Because there is a great story, and I do believe it's true, but I don't think it's linked to the Vegas thing. But he would send out payroll checks to his employees, and he'd say, look, please go ahead and cash this. But if you could, it'd be great if you didn't. And some employees still have those checks on their walls because they never cashed them.
They never cashed them.
And of course, because of deregulation, he was able to get larger planes. I haven't done enough research to figure out, but deregulation impacted him too. It freed him up to do some things that he previously couldn't do. So, and one of them apparently was to buy bigger planes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I couldn't dig in as enough to find out, because initially wasn't there a conflict with the post office, and wasn't the post office unhappy about what they and UPS were doing?
Yes, I think there was some type of tussle with the post office that he actually ended up winning. Yeah, this is probably what threw him into the Cato camp. I think this is anything with the post office turns you into a libertarian, I think,
Yeah.
pretty instantly.
Well, but at least the post office is sanctioned by the Constitution, Ron. So it's got that going for it.
True. Yeah, he pioneered the hub and spoke system. He picked Memphis because it was a central location. The weather was good. It had a lot of space, and he also had a lot of other innovations. He started to put in the drop boxes around the country in 1975, and he did his first online package tracking in 1994. And of course, the company went public in 78, and it reached $1 billion in revenue by 83. And he rebranded officially to FedEx in 1994.
Oh, pulling out the Federal Express thing and just going to FedEx. Okay.
Going to FedEx, yep. But yeah, no, it's just an amazing. It's an amazing story. It really is.
Yeah, yeah. And what I can remember as a kid that the FedEx commercials that I first saw on TV with this guy who talked really fast.
Yep.
And that guy actually parlayed it into, I remember like appearing on Johnny Carson and all these other things. Right. And of course, people thought that he was actually an employee. He was not. He was just a comedian actually who had trained himself to speak very quickly. So.
Right. I can remember first hearing about FedEx thinking, that's crazy. You mean to tell me I dropped this package into this box somewhere and all the packages go to Memphis and then go back out? That makes no sense. And then thinking, oh, geez, this is ingenious.
Yeah. Actually makes a ton of sense. So
it does.
But anyway, we're up against our first break. Want to remind our listeners that they can get a hold of either one of us by sending one email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. That's the new email address. Remember that, asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. The website, of course, is still thesoulofenterprise.com, where you can see show notes as well as previews to upcoming shows as we post them. You can go back and listen to all of our previous shows, which are now after this one will be 548. But right now, a word from our sponsors.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about a memorable mentor, Fred Smith, the founder of Federal Express. And Ed, the other interesting thing is he retired as CEO in 2022, but then, of course, he was executive chairman until he passed. And he he grew the company to 17 million shipments they do a day. And it's just amazing. 698 aircraft, which I think is the largest cargo fleet. in the world, and he's got over 200,000 motorized vehicles. They employ 500,000 people worldwide. 370,000 are in the U.S. at over 5,000 facilities, and they process 500,000 million tracking requests per day. He was also, FedEx was honored with the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award in 1990. If you remember that, that was quite a big award.
Yep.
He won the Wright Brothers Trophy, numerous lifetime recognitions. He was briefly considered for defense secretary under President Bush, which is interesting.
And he was a friend of John Kerry's. So, and when Bush ran against Kerry, it was all three of them were friends, but he did end up backing George W. Bush. So,
and he was also friends with John McCain.
Yes,
and he was a pallbearer at McCain's funeral. And you know this, he made a cameo in the movie Castaway.
Yes.
I still love the commercial that FedEx did when the FedEx guy shows up at his wife's with the package, and it's got the GPS finder and the
flares. Yeah,
that was great. And he authored the original FedEx Manager's Guide, and he co-wrote an article in Proceedings on marine leadership principles. He fought, and I think I mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks back, but he fought for two big policy issues in his life. These were really meaningful to him, which was increasing domestic energy production. He never wanted to live through another OPEC. That really bugged him. So he really wanted to drill, baby, drill, if you will. And he also was fiercely, as you can imagine, free trade. And he wanted to defend free trade around the world. I'm sure he despised what Trump is doing with these tariffs.
Well, no doubt.
And in 2019, the New York Times wrote a piece criticizing FedEx for not paying taxes. Smith was incensed. He challenged A.G. Sulzberger, the publisher, to a public debate on corporate tax policy. And of course, I don't think it ever happened. He would have wiped the floor with him. But he also kept the world semi-functional during COVID. They flew 777s with PPE equipment across the Pacific 1,000 times. In the early months of 2020, he said himself only two networks could deliver the vaccines when they came out, FedEx and UPS. And he said, and we did it tens of millions deliveries at 99+% accuracy. And a great line of his is, there's only two kinds of economic systems, the market-driven and the government-directed. That's it. The more you move toward a state-directed economy, the less efficient and the more corrupt it becomes.
Yep. Can't say I disagree with that. But I think this is also something that I tried to do some research on and couldn't find. So maybe this is something you did come across. But the whole tracking system, which was when it was put in place, there are a couple of reasons for that, and I think that a lot of people don't fully get it. One was that not only did he put it in place so that they could obviously track the packages, but it was also so that when he turned that over to the web, and customers could come in and see where their package was, that the customer service people couldn't give them a line, because the customer knew exactly where the package was, because they were able to see the same exact system as their customer service folks. And I think that's pretty wild right there.
No, it's exactly right. It was the Cosmos system, which stood for FedEx Customer Oriented Service and Management Operating System. He spent $1 billion on this system, putting it online in 1994. I think even at the time he gave computer terminals to his biggest customers, probably a 2080 rule or something, and said, look, you can come right into our system and you can see exactly what we see. And he took a big hit for this on an earnings call or something. He was really angry. Shareholders said, well, how does this help the efficiency of delivery? You're spending $1 billion on this program. And he said, it's not about efficiency. It's about creating an excuseless culture inside of FedEx so my people can't BS the customers about where their packages are. That's the difference between an efficiency person and an entrepreneur.
Right.
I love that story. It's a great, great story. And yeah, he was really, and he also said, by the way, about that tracking system, he said, the information on the package is just as valuable as the package itself.
Metadata.
Yeah,
Metadata.
yeah, which is a really interesting line. And again, if you look at this Memphis International Hub, and I'll talk about this a little bit more probably in the next segment because I toured it with our colleague Dan Morris. One of the best tours I've ever taken of a business, you know. But the Memphis International Airport is 940 acres, and between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., it's literally the busiest airport in the world. And it handles over 2 million packages daily, and each package, once it hits the sorting line, is sorted within 15 minutes. It takes them about a half hour to unload an airplane, and then there's about 80 miles of conveyor belts, and they're unloading 250 airplanes in a 24-hour period. They have the capacity to land an airplane every 40 seconds.
Wow.
It is the most amazing thing you have ever seen. It's like a symphony orchestra that just is perfectly timed, everything about it. They do 375 destinations globally. The Memphis hub alone employs 11,000 sorting staff and handles over 4.4 million tons of air freight as of 2018 anyway. They employ 30,000 people in Memphis, so they're the biggest employer in Memphis. They're all non-union except for the pilots. They deliver pacemakers to specific hospital rooms. They can ship clinical samples, liquid or dried. They can ship complex alcohol shipments because of all the rules in all the various countries. They can handle all of that. They can ship food products at certain temperatures that are required, and they even ship the giant pandas from China.
From China.
And the Memphis Shelby County Airport Authority wanted to rename the Memphis International Airport after Fred Smith. About even 30 years ago, they wanted to do this.
Oh.
And Fred said, he told the guy, he said, Fred told me that naming buildings was for dead people. When I'm gone, do what you want to do. But while I'm alive, hell no. So he didn't let him do it. I'm sure it's going to be the Fred Smith Airport.
Yeah. At some point.
Any day now. Yeah. So.
Hey, getting back to the Cosmo system for a second, I also heard that he ended up selling that to the airlines.
Yes, he because he did the tracking number two was his innovation. They did end up selling that to airlines, and that's what made passenger airlines much better at luggage handling, and it reduced the complaints around lost baggage and things like that. So yeah, was another great source of. That's why I was so interested when you and Greg last week were talking about Tesla selling the self-driving technology to other companies. Well, Fred Smith did the same thing with the tracking system.
Yeah. I'm guessing UPS came up with their own.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
And he and I read this in a book. How much time do I have? We have 4 minutes. Okay, let me get this story out there. He says, okay, so in the book by Michael Bash, Customer Culture, How FedEx and Other Great Companies Put the Customer First Every Day, Fred Smith challenged his C-suite. He said, look, the 95% rule was a sacred cow in FedEx's early days, basically saying that, if we're within 95% on time, doing everything right, that's good enough. He said, but if we handle 1 million packages a day and we mess up 5%, that means we mess up 50,000 packages a day. And since one person ships to another, that means we disappoint 100,000 people each day. He says it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that before long, you've disappointed everyone in America who ships and receives packages. So then he created what he called the hierarchy of horrors, which of the 5% disappointments, what is the worst thing we can do to the customer? What is the next worst thing? And so on. He and the senior management team identified 8 major horrors that, displeased the customer. And now that's kind of grown into a little bit more, but it turned into the FedEx Service Quality Index. This is something they look at every single day, which is like right day, late service failures, wrong day, late service failures, traces, complaints, opened, reopened, missing proof of delivery, missed package, damaged package, lost package. These are all the things that could upset a customer. And they track them religiously every single day. And they've got this SQI up to 99.7. In fact, the guy who gave us the tour of the FedEx facility, his name was Carl. He was the manager of quality and process improvement. So he was intimately familiar with this SQI and told us kind of the mechanics behind it. And it was up to like 99 points, just unbelievable. He had it out to like 8 decimal places. He knew what it was. But, hey, if you're doing 16 million packages a day, that makes a difference.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and of course, the brilliant marketing slogan, which was absolutely positively overnight, right?
Yeah. The other great innovation, Ed, we haven't even touched on yet was this. Yeah. The service guarantee. I mean, absolutely positively overnight. We don't deliver, you don't pay, period. Now that has been watered down over the years. But it's still there. I mean, you can still, they'll stand by their work. I've sent stuff that has gone awry and they've always made it good every single time. Yep. I just think they have that culture that, says, hey, it's the lifetime value of the customer, not just a transaction.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, though, we're up against our next break. Want to remind our listeners, can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. Please go out and rate this podcast by going to ratethispodcast.com/TSOE. And don't forget our Patreon channel, where you can listen to the show commercial free, as well as our bonus episodes. That's available at patreon.com/TSOE. But right now, a word from our sponsors.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about Fred Smith, the founder of Federal Express, who unfortunately passed away on June 21st of this year. I was in Orlando, Ed, when that happened, and that really bummed me out. I think it was Saturday, and it was, it was kind of depressing to see that. But if you remember, September 11th, 2001, obviously was a big deal. Now, the FedEx, because they were a Baldrige Award winner, one of the requirements of winning that award was, if possible, you had to make your facility available for public tours. And of course, FedEx was known for that. But after 9/11, they had to kind of clamp down on it. I think they did shut them down for a while, but then they opened them back up and they said, but the only way to do it is you got to have an account with FedEx. You got to contact somebody at FedEx. You have to jump through these hoops and we'll let you know and blah, blah, blah. Well, I did it all. I did all the hoop jumping, and Dan and I on September 9th, 2002 flew to Memphis. So almost 1 year after 9/11, we fly to Memphis from 2 different airports in the Bay Area. We land, and a guy named Carl, this manager of the quality and process improvement, he picked us up at the airport at like 10 p.m. And he takes us into the airport, and around 11:15, 9,000 people start coming through, and they're going through the magnometer, right? Because it's an airport, and they're the sorters for the evening shift, and it was absolutely amazing. So he took us all around the facility. They take you, they show you the assembly line, the war room that's kind of in the middle of the hub, where they work out all the problems. If there's weather issues, if the planes can't get into the countries where they're going, they have to divert them and find other ways to get I mean, it must just be a logistical nightmare when you start to think about it. And he's driving us around in a golf cart on the tarmac. And the planes are kind of they're coming into the gate, they're getting unloaded, and he's driving us through, and it's just a bustle of activity like you wouldn't believe. And Dan and I are noticing as we drive by the noses of under the noses of the planes, we see that right under the pilot's window, there's a name, Sophie, Ron, Ed, whatever. And we're looking at that, and Dan and I look at one, and it must be the pilot's name. And so we asked the tour guide, Carl, we say, hey, Carl, what's with the name? Is that the pilot's name? He said, no. He said, every time a plane is going to get rechristened, repainted, christened, he says they drop their kid's name in a hat. I think it's only certain ages. And I don't know, I think it's newborns too, obviously.
Okay. Yeah.
And they drop the name in the hat, and they draw out, and they dedicate a plane to a kid of one of their sorting employees. And most of these 9,000 people that come through, I think it's 11,000 now, they're part-time. They have other jobs. They're working during in fact, our tour guide, another one of our tour guides, worked at a not-for-profit somewhere during the day. He said, FedEx is my retirement, because they get full benefits.
Even though it's part-time.
Yep. And I just thought, oh, geez, can you imagine being a 10-year-old kid and having a FedEx plane named after you? That's cool. Amazing. That's really cool. That is really cool. That blew my mind.
Probably still get beat up in the playground, though, but,
yeah. and I know if I went on YouTube and kind of poked around at that ceremony, and they do it for kids that have cancer or,
sure,
that type of thing. But I mean, having a FedEx plane named after you, that's just amazing. And yeah, it was an amazing tour. And as you can imagine, at some point the planes they get reloaded after everything's been sorted, and then it's like every 90 seconds a plane is blasting off to its destination.
Do they have to all try to get out before like the other commercial traffic starts leaving Memphis? Yeah.
Yes, and I don't know when that happens or when other planes start to come into Memphis from other locations, but when you walk through the sorting facility, they have countdown clocks, big screens with countdowns, and certain planes obviously have to get out sooner, like the ones going to Tokyo or what, and you can see they're running on constraint. The whole thing is time constrained. They
Right.
got to get that plane out of there by a certain time so it can hit its destination. It is just amazing. And you can watch, Greg can probably find this, but there is a great YouTube video of the Memphis hub that kind of gives you an inside look at the sorting system and just all sorts of, how they unload the planes and reload them. And it's just the most amazing thing you've ever seen.
Yeah. So I did, by the way, Ron, track down the U.S. money back guarantee policy. Now they do suspend it, it seems, when there's major weather. That's one thing that they have caught out. So, for example, last time they suspended the guarantee was between January 29th and February 10th of this year. So they had suspended those, but currently they offer U.S. domestic and U.S. import-export eligibility includes the FedEx First Overnight, Priority Overnight, Standard Overnight, 2-day AM, First Overnight Extra, Priority Overnight Extra, Standard Overnight Extra, and then all of the international First Priority, etc. What does not seem to be covered on the guarantee anymore, and this is the stuff that is FedEx Freight and FedEx Office. Which, if you think about it, was actually Kinko's. So if they when they took over Kinko's, there is not a guarantee on that stuff. And of course, their freight service, which is their flanking product, is not guaranteed.
Right. That's the ground. Is that?
Yeah, basically their ground. Yeah,
their ground. Yeah. Couple things I learned from FedEx, Ed, and we talk about this all the time, but is that you got to put capacity before revenue.
Yes.
And this is just an extreme example of that. I think the first time they flew in 73, they had 11 packages and 6 of them were a test. I think one of them was a gift for Fred Smith's birthday or something. Just think of the infrastructure they had to have in place, and even just 25 cities to be able to do that.
Right. Well, and where do they advertise? Did they go to law firm? I mean, because I would imagine that one of the spaces would be legal documents. I mean, this is back in the day before there were some things weren't accepted via fax machine.
Yeah. Certain things had to be, physically signed or notarized, back in these days when it was all documents. I mean, I remember I sent something FedEx to San Diego same day. And it was just one of the typical, 8 by 11 package, right? But it was like $375, but they got it down there the same day.
Right. And well, your other choice was to fly it there yourself, which, by the way, I was going to mention what you and Dan should have done was just put yourself in packages and flown you into Memphis and.
We did ask one of the guides, what's the weirdest thing that you found to be shipped, and he said, well, we've had some snakes come in those tubes, and he said
God.
that's been a surprise.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm sure they have better screening systems now, but who knows.
Yeah. Do they do organs, human organs?
They do not.
Okay.
There is an outfit that almost has a monopoly on it.
Okay.
In fact, NPR's done some shows on this because they're all upset but that's a really highly specialized area. They don't, but they do some of the other stuff like food and stuff and other medical, like pacemakers and other, but I think plasma maybe they might do, but not organs.
Not organs. Okay. Yeah. Got you.
And the other thing, and this kind of ties into the guarantee, but Fred Smith had this great thing, and this I stole when we were talking about how to recover from a service failure. He had this thing called the sunset rule, where he said the sun will not set on an unresolved customer or employee problem that is not dealt with in some way. Even if you can't solve it, you'll start to deal with it.
A process.
And he called that the sunset rule. And you see a version of that in the Ritz-Carlton basics. They want you, whoever first hears about the customer complaint, no matter who it is, no matter what their responsibility level, or even if they can solve the problem, they own it.
Yeah.
They have to marshal it all the way to its completion, to the customer satisfaction. And that's kind of a variation of the sunset rule, but I really like that.
Yeah, it's not my fault, but it is my problem, kind of deal, right? So yeah,
yeah, exactly right, exactly right. Wow. So what other things have we learned from FedEx? I mean, the capacity before revenue was a biggie, because that really hit home the point that, yeah, you got to make some investments before you can build up revenue. And
every time I brought that up in context, I mean, to some extent, every business needs to be like that, but with the exception of, I find so many professional service firms that are like, no, we have to be running over capacity before we begin to hire. And like, you do realize that is going, no matter what you try to do, is going to be a problem, because it's going to cause customer service issues.
Big time.
You've got to build capacity before you build revenue, but professional firms, even to this day, I think just do not buy into that. So too few do, if they do at all.
No, you're exactly right. It does. It creates massive customer service failures, and man, that'll destroy loyalty, which will destroy profitability, and also, the whole customer experience thing goes out the window. The other thing, I just think the fact that he focused on giving the customer a way to peer into the system without having that, didn't have any effect on the efficiency of delivery, but it did have an effect on the customer experience.
Right. Can you imagine an accounting firm putting a tracking system on their tax return?
Well, we've been joking about that for years, right? I mean, it would point out where the bottlenecks are. And that would be sitting on the partner's floor waiting for a review, probably. But yeah.
Let's hope that doesn't happen anymore, Ron. I know exactly what you're talking about. When I started working at a CPA firm, the tax partner, his office was literally piles of folders.
Yeah.
And I think that is every tax partner in every firm.
It is, actually, or it was. It shouldn't be anymore with the paperless office. But yeah.
Right.
It's still, but the review process is a major bottleneck if firms are still doing that, for sure. It's just Fred Smith. What an amazing visionary. I mean, and he taught me a lot about customer service. He just knew that this wasn't, even though he didn't say it this way, he knew the lifetime value of a customer, kind of like Walt Disney did. Conrad Hilton, some of these other entrepreneurs that we've talked about in the past, he understood that it was the lifetime value of the customer that mattered, not the math of the moment.
Right.
And they live by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So, all right, Ed. Well, we're up against it again. And folks, I'd like to remind you, if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. Do go out to our Patreon channel, where you can subscribe and get access to our bonus content. Ed and I do a bonus show after the end of each of our shows, and you can have access to that. And you can find that out at patreon.com/TSOE. And now a word from our sponsors, including Woodard.
And we are back talking memorable mentors on the Soul of Enterprise. Haven't done an episode about this in I think 4 or 5 years, Ron. So we're glad to bring this back. Fred Smith, founder of Federal Express, who passed away in June of this year. Also, Ron, you mentioned him being making a cameo appearance as himself in Castaway. He's also a big football fan. And in 2003, he purchased a minority share of the Washington Redskins. Yep, and in total with the group that he was in, they owned 40% of the team until they sold it out to the majority owner, Dan Snyder, who they were not happy with. But what was interesting is that after that he served as the owner of the Memphis Mad Dogs, which I had not heard about until I did this research. Memphis Mad Dogs are a U.S. based Canadian football team.
Huh. Wow.
So, which is interesting. So, yes, big football fan. He also, just some of his other achievements, just to list them out, he was inducted into the Junior Achievement Business Hall of Fame in 1998. He was induced into the SMEI Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame in 2000, CEO of the Year in 2004, according to the magazine Chief Executive, the Kellogg Award for Distinguished Leadership, presented by the Kellogg School of Management. He also was a Franklin Business Leadership Award winner from the Franklin Institute and the 2011 recipient of the Tony Janus Award for Distinguished Contributions to Commercial Aviation. So I'm sure that he made some innovations from an aviation standpoint that were part of FedEx that I do not begin to understand. So there you go.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, there's some great videos of that you can find on YouTube of the pilots flying a plane, and sometimes they'll bring a guest or something, and they're flying from Memphis to Oakland or whatever. And the one I watched, it was 2 women pilots that were flying the plane, and they were talking about, hey, we have people's hopes and dreams here behind us. I know the post office likes to say that, right? We have people's hopes and dreams, and in fact, I think Cliff Clavin used to say that on Cheers. Because remember the episode where Norm takes over his route, and Cliff gives him the mail bag, and he's walking out. He says, "Be careful with that bag, Norm. There's people's hopes and dreams in there." And Norm pulls out a handful of stuff. He says, "Yeah, and a bunch of car wash coupons."
Could be a hope and a dream for somebody.
I think the other big lesson that I learned from FedEx, it's just studying FedEx, especially the Service Quality Index, it really taught me that, when you're looking at KPIs, that you can't just look at data. You have to have a theory about what makes customers happy or what upsets them. In this case, it was more what upsets them, what FedEx could do wrong. But it taught me about leading indicators and how we could apply leading indicators. And it was one of the inspirations for predictive indicators, KPIs, the way we use the term predictive, not just performance. And that was another big insight.
Measuring what's important to customers, certainly where their package is important to a FedEx customer, not the number of packages that they're serving, and certainly not how many times was it handled or any kind of efficiency metric inside FedEx.
Yeah. And so the whole KPI thing, and in fact, I'm looking at the book Measure What Matters, and I have a whole section on FedEx. And then, of course, you have a section on this book about sabermetrics.
Oh, right.
And how sabermetrics changed, just everything, right?
Yeah. No, the impact to this day. Yeah, it's not batting average, but on base percentage. I sort of remember writing that.
Yeah. In fact, there's a picture of Sean in this book.
Oh, right. No, he's 19 years old, buddy. So there you go.
I know, it's amazing. I know. It really makes me feel old. Yeah, I just want to read one thing and this is from Fred Smith. Actually, he said this to an audience at the J.D. Power and Associates Customer Service Conference in Santa Monica, California, on November 13th, 2003. And Ed, think about all the AI, think about all the tech that has happened since then, since 2003. And listen to what he said. FedEx, for example, has always emphasized great customer service. But now that we offer a broad array of services beyond just express delivery, we are seeking to differentiate ourselves through an outstanding customer experience, which is broader than just service. Not surprisingly, we're taking the holistic approach. We want to make sure that the customer has a great experience at every touch point. On the phone with our service reps, on the website while trying to ship a package, at the front door when our courier delivers the package, and at our service centers when dropping off a package. And not only do we look at the touch points, but we also pay attention to the life cycle of the customer's experience. We try to treat the customer royally, not only when we first get her business, but also when her business needs or package volume change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was amazing, especially since that I know that a huge preponderance of FedEx at one point was document service, and how the internet must have completely impacted that. The fact that you can send a PDF file or email and all of those things that changed, and things like DocuSign and those kinds of technologies that have in many ways replaced the absolutely positively has to be there overnight aspect of documents. But yet FedEx has continued to thrive and expand. I mean, part of that is also that we expect everything delivered to our house now, and the expansion of Amazon. And I know that occasionally Amazon will use FedEx, although they use primarily UPS in their own delivery now. But it is interesting to note that they would I'm sure they perceived email and the explosion of email as a threat at some point. Yet they were able to overcome that. So
yeah, didn't they start a Zap thing or something? I forget. They bought a company that was trying to deal with that. I forget the details of that, but I know they tried to adjust to that trend. And look, I know FedEx has had its issues. It's it's in the mature phase of its cycle.
Right.
But one thing I found interesting, and Fred Smith, I think, said this at a Cato talk he gave somewhere, but he said when you look at people look at the volume of packages, and we're certainly not the biggest, he said, but by value, we're by far the highest value. In other words, we ship the most expensive stuff, like computers, Apple, that type of stuff. I don't know if that's still true, but at one point it was. But now I look at the fleet that Amazon has, and I think there's 200,000 trucks just around me. I mean, I'll drive down the road and I'll see like a fleet of like 30 of them pass me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One. It's amazing how much that
logistic portion. Well, we talked about that, I think, in a bonus episode several weeks ago, that it has become the number one package delivery service in the country.
Yeah. surpassing, I think, UPS and the post office almost simultaneously. So
that's amazing. But
yeah, Fred Smith, what a great, just visionary entrepreneur. He just persevered. Even after getting a C, he
alleged C. That's never been proven that he got a C on the paper, but it makes for good story. Good story.
It's one of those things that's too good to check.
There you go. Too good to fact check. All right, Ron. Well, what we got coming up next week?
Next week, Ed, and I'm going to come up with a better name for this, I promise, but we're going to look at time well spent. In other words, we talk about time prices, and there is something that's the equivalent for measuring the experience economy. And I think it's fascinating. So we're going to dive into that.
All right. Well, I'll catch you next week. I'll see you in 167 hours. This has been The Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Transformation Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice through coaching, education, community, and resources. Join us next week on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's noon Pacific. In the meantime, please visit us on the web at www.thesoulofenterprise.com.